Yeah, I mean, Callum, Brendan Rodgers got a mention there. The club gave him incredible power, I think, and we've heard stories about how he single-handedly, destroyed the scouting department at Leicester. He kind of completely changed it up when it was working. We even saw like Dave Rennie, for example, who was a long time servant of the club. I think he left the club because of a disagreement or whatever with Brendan Rodgers, if rumours are to be believed. Would you like to see less power given to a manager? Where do you sit with this one?
It's got to be sort of a 50-50 thing, because ultimately, manager, he knows his style. Like it sort of stems to the whole thing. It needs to be joined up, sort of in the flow. You need the club to believe in a philosophy. You need to have the people upstairs who know how to identify that philosophy in terms of whether that be a recruitment, whether that be how they're conditioned in the gym, on the training pitch. You need people who can look after them from a welfare perspective. And then ultimately you need the manager who comes in with, I want this style of play. You need those sort of cogs in place. It all sort of works together. That manager will identify players. That scouting team he'll identify a mold of player he wants for certain areas. That's then on the scouting team to then go and find those players that fit that mold. If that doesn't work, then, sort of, I hear sort of Anil's point about, sometimes you have got to stick to your guns, and if results aren't always working, I think we've noticed quite evidently over the last couple of years, Leicester are a very impatient fan base. Ever since we won, I do think that is partly down to the fact that Leicester won the league. Like, it has just made people impatient because they've had that taste, and once you've had that taste once, you want it again. Like, everyone wants it again. We all joke and laugh about the Big Six being, they lose one game and they cry, it's the end of the world or whatnot. But like, everyone wants that, and Leicester are equally as guilty of that. I mean, I think back to last season alone, that 2-1 defeat against Plymouth, like, God, I thought we were relegated to League One. I thought we just got back-to-back relegations. And like, of course, in isolation, that is terrible, and like, you've got to have standards. But I don't think Leicester's fan base right now has the patience to do that. I think it has to be sort of very Enzo Maresca-y, come in, hit the ground running now. I think part of the reason why it was all skewed up was because Maresca unexpectedly departed last summer, but it's not like a sole blame. Like, a lot of things have gone wrong. You need people in all areas to have joined up. Even in the bits where we don't see, you need people with like the welfare who encourage people to move closer. You want people that are going to be willing to come closer. At the time, it worked because Harry Winks was playing good football last season, as was Yannick Vestergaard. They weren't causing trouble last season. So they were doing their due diligence. Like, they were allowed to travel, but obviously this season they're not. But looking at the bigger picture, maybe they were wrong to recruit all along, because there should have been sort of due diligence in the background of, okay, what are these players are like this when they're good, but what are they like when it's going against the grain? Like, we need players that care. We need players that are willing to roll their sleeves up and get stuck in. We need the scout to identify things, not just technical ability, but mental ability. Like, how are they going to cope when we've lost, how are they going to cope when we've lost 5 games on the bounce in the Premier League, not when we've won 10 games in a row in the Championship? Because it's easy. Everyone's singing and dancing, singing off the same hymn sheet when you're winning, but it's equally important to love it. In a way, it's almost, you've got to prepare for the worst, even if things are going well. Like, flick of the switch, everyone was sort of quite excited about going back to the Premier League, and then Maresca went, and everyone sort of went, oh, well, what do we do now? Like, oh, Steve Cooper's coming. Oh, Jude Hall's gone. Like, oh, well, he'll go next. And sort of, it all just came in, and everyone was sort of like, there was no sort of like, oh, God, I had no idea what to do. Everything sort of like got ripped up almost. Like, so it's got to be joined up thinking from top to bottom, and sort of looking at every angle. Like, can these players live up to the plate when the going gets tough? Like, that's why we won the FA Cup, because we had players that were able to ride it out. Ultimately, they didn't qualify for the Champions League, but they came under intense pressure in that FA Cup final and they won it because they had players that, and it's why we stayed up. Obviously, a few little sprinkles, but people like Robert Huth and that, they weren't going to sit there and wallow if things were going wrong. They'd roll the sleeves up and get stuck in. That's why we stayed up. That's why we won the league the year after. So you've got to look at it from all angles, from both positive and negative. Even if things are going well, you've got to prepare in advance, because even the best clubs in the world don't stay at the top of the tree for the longest. As you can see, like Liverpool, is only their second Premier League title in 30 years. Like, they've not been top of the tree that long, but right now they've got it right because they prepare for every scenario.
Yeah, I mean, Manny, on our video the other day with Rob Tanner, you said something about how, someone should have had the balls to knock on Enzo's door and say, we are not giving Yannick Vestergaard a 3-year contract. And I think this comes down again to the trust that's put in the manager, and also decision making, because Callum just said there, yes, these players are, when things are going well, it's all good, no problems. But they knew what Yannick was like because he'd fallen out with two other managers by that point, and they still, signed off on a 3-year deal because Enzo wanted to give him that.
It seems clear from things that Rob has said and others have said that the managers have been giving too much influence in signings, and that's been going on longer than recent history of yo-yoing. Brendan himself wanted more and more influence, and Brendan's a brilliant coach, absolutely sensational coach. He still is. But when it comes to choosing players, he's horrific, absolutely horrible. Give him brilliant players, he will do a brilliant job. Give him total control and your club will start to fade. Unfortunately, that's just been the way it's been for Brendan throughout his career. But they're two different skill sets. A guy who's a brilliant coach isn't necessarily going to be a brilliant talent scout. They're two totally different skill requirements. Whether they have the eye or not is two different things. So I think the club should stop trying to assume that the manager is a one-stop shop for every answer. You might be a brilliant coach, but doesn't necessarily mean you're brilliant at transfers. You might be a brilliant coach, but you're not particularly good at man managing. So identify what you want your coach, and I should really use the word coach more than manager now. I think manager's more of a 90s term. Europeans have been using coaches or a head coach for decades. So I think, again, we're all looking for that Fergie figure, right? Or the Wenger figure. He's going to come in, tell the players what's what. Everyone in the club's going to listen to him. The fans are going to follow him, and everything's going to be great. Those individuals like Ferguson, Wenger, Clough, they come once every 15, 20 years, and they're rarely, if you happen to have it at Leicester, then you're doing darn well. Realistically, in the modern age, that kind of style doesn't work anymore. Human beings have changed. Kids don't want to be told, clean his boots, you're going to do this, and, if you don't do it, you don't like it. It's much more nuanced than that. Kids are multi-millionaires. They're just going to say, do you know what? If I don't perform, you're going to get the sack, and I'll see if the next manager's nicer. So you have to be cuter than that in the modern game. Those sort of one-stop managers to have an overview of everything, even like Nigel Pearson, that's really rare to find. And those figures are fading. Your likes of your Warnocks and those other things in the lower divisions, they're all dinosaurish. Pulis, Big Sam, these figures. Tony Mowbray, how's he done it? That's a good example. Been around the blocks 100 times. How's he done this half season at West Brom? The game has moved on from these structures. So we need to find a new sustainable structure. And that isn't just appointing a manager, because the manager, if he's crap, he'll be gone. If he's good, he'll probably be gone as well, just like Enzo was. So you have to have someone, that consistency in the background, who's going to stay, who's going to realise, this is what we should do and this is why. And if we had that within, then it still comes back down to Enzo Ball was working. The fans were mostly happy. I know there was a few moaning whinges, but mostly they were happy. The players were happy. As soon as Enzo goes, the logical thing is plug in, plug out, find somebody who plays identically to Enzo. Ideally, in my opinion, also been trained by Pep. The players will hear the same message, and you'll have a better chance of success. They go a completely different direction and then go in a different direction again.